Okay, so let us begin. Okay, so today we're going to look at Pesher Habakkuk Min HaMegillot Yam HaMelech. The Habakkuk Pesher from the scrolls found at Kirbet Qumran by the Sea of Salt. In more conventional English, the Habakkuk Pesher from the Dead Sea Scrolls. Okay, so in Cave 1 at Qumran was found a manuscript, namely Pesher Habakkuk, a commentary on the book of Habakkuk, which is found in the Tanakh. Okay, so here is shown an extract from the actual scroll of Pesher Habakkuk. Over here you see the Qumran caves near the Sea of Salt, the Yam HaMelech, the Dead Sea, in Eretz Israel. And here on the right hand side bottom you see other excavations of a site very close to what you see on the left hand side bottom. Okay, so I'm going to work with the translation of a Habakkuk Pesher by Professor Robert Eisenman in consultation with Professor Michael Wise. That is an excellent translation. I haven't seen anything better. And okay, so my name is Johann van Rooyen, and I'm going to put forward a commentary on the Pesher. And I'm trying to show that Professor Eisenman gave an excellent interpretation of the material that we have in front of us. It is very difficult to see what is wrong with this. It's just an excellent sort of a interpretation, just looking at text. If you don't look at the paleographics and carbon-14 testing and stuff like this, but you only look at the internal evidence in the text, then I believe that Professor Eisenman, as well as many other scholars, have got an excellent way of viewing this. Okay, so my name is Johann van Rooyen. The English version of Johann van Rooyen is just John Rhodes, and the German version is Johann Rode. So Johann van Rooyen just means John Rhodes for those in the English-speaking world. Right, okay, so we scroll on further. Okay, so this is a write-up that I've done, which I believe is going to be given to you, hopefully, shared with you. It starts with a number of clarifications. We don't have the time to tread through this now. It's not interesting stuff. So there's also a write-up here on the Rekavim, Johannadav ben Rekav, very important concept. I'm not going to spend time with this now. This is a very nice article on the Rechabites. Okay, so let's go to the background, to the Pesher Habakkuk. Okay, so we've talked about the Pesher Habakkuk being found in Cave 1 at Qumran, and what we are going to start with is to be able to understand the Pesher. I believe it is necessary to follow in the footsteps of Professor Robert Eisenman, and start with looking at the person of Yaakov HaTzadik, James the Just, as the high priest, as the opposition high priest of a purist Saddukite zealot opposition in ancient Israel in the late Second Temple period. Now, James the Just was the brother of Jesus, and one of the things that we will see is that this person doesn't have much in common, practically nothing at all, with the Pauline flavor of Christianity that people have received. And so that argues, as Professor Eisenman have said, that likewise it will be with Jesus. If you've uncovered and reconstructed Yaakov HaTzadik, James the brother of Jesus, that is also an implicit reconstruction of a person and the ideas and the concept of his brother Jesus. Okay, so the chronicler Hegesippus, quoted by Eusebius in Ecclesiastical History of the Church, wrote as follows about Yaakov, the brother of Jesus. Yaakov, a brother of a master, succeeded to the government of a kahal, of an assembly, many sources called church, but it's just, the underlying Hebrew behind the term in Greek of ecclesia. It's just the Hebrew term kahal, which means a group of people who have heard a voice and have gathered around this in a sort of an assembly. Okay, in conjunction with the apostles. He has been called Hatzadik, the just, Latin justice, by all from the time of a master to the present day. He was set apart, he was consecrated, he was made kadosh from his mother's womb, and he drank no wine nor strong drink, nor did he eat meat. No razor came upon his head, he did not anoint himself with oil, and he never used any Greco-Roman public bathhouses. He alone entered into the Kodesh Kodeshim, the Holy of Holies of a temple in Jerusalem, for he wore not woolen but white linen garments. And he was in the habit of entering alone into the Beit HaMikdash and was found upon his knees, begging forgiveness for the people, so that his knees became calloused like that of a camel, in consequence of his constantly kneeling on his knees in the Avodat Hashem and asking forgiveness for the people. Because of his exceeding great tzedakah, righteousness, justice, he was called Oblias, which has got to do with a term like pillar and bulwark of a people, as well as the tzaddik, a just, righteous person, in accordance with what the prophets declare concerning him. Okay, so what we see here is that Yaakov was a brother of Jesus, and he didn't drink strong drink. We also know that he never married, that he was a male virgin, and that he didn't eat meat. Now, things like this were the ways of holy war. It's basically the sort of a ancient Jewish, sorry for the term, jihad or holy war tradition. Not to eat meat and to at least for some time to abstain from sexual contact. Okay, so also in the book of Revelation, I believe in about chapter 7, there's talk about the so-called 144,000. And it is said there that they are virgins. Now, that has got nothing to do with, Roman Catholic priesthood kind of stuff and so forth. It's an expression of holy war. A person is maybe married, and he's got a wife and children, but when he separates himself for the purposes of Milchama Kedusha, holy war, and he goes to this holy war in a state of separation, because these ancient groups of holy warriors, these apocalypticists, they believe that concept that an armada, an army of malachim, angels, would come to their side, but that would only happen if they are in a sufficiently high state of purity. And so all these purity regulations and things had to do with being in a consecrated state of holy war. Okay, we also see Yaakov Tzaddik here as entering the Holy of Holies, like the high priest on Yom Kippur, and donning specifically white linen garments, also was the clothing of the high priest during the Yom Kippur Avodah. And so the Yom Kippur service was all about the al-chet, the forgiveness of sins. And we see Yaakov Tzaddik functioning in this capacity. We know that at the time when he was, doing this, that the family of Hanan, people like Hanan bar Hanan, Anas, the son of Anas, and his brother who was murdered, Jonathan, they were the Kohen Hagadols, they were the high priest of Israel. So what we're seeing over here is a person from a group who are convicted that the official establishment high priesthood is hopelessly impure, and that a high priest of sufficient purity and absolute devotion has got to enter into the Holy of Holies during Yom Kippur in order to obtain an efficacious atonement for the people. Okay, so just note as a sideway that, you know, the title given to Yaakov Tzaddik was Tzaddik. And the Latin term for justice, for this justice and righteousness, the Latin term is literally justice. And this is going to come to the fourth a little bit later. Okay, so let's go down. Yaakov Tzaddik was murdered by the high priest Annas, the son of Hannas, in about the year 62, according to writings of Josephus. In the above writing, Yaakov is presented as a man of great devotion and a person very zealous for the Torah of Moshe. He entered into the Kodesh Kodeshim, the holy place of the temple, and into the Holy of Holies on a Yom Kippur. This is evidently a Yom Kippur prayer service, stated by Professor Eisenman, also by Bernheim, 1997, evidently as the opposition high priest of the purest Sadducites, performing a prayer service on behalf of a nation on Yom Kippur, on the Day of Atonement. Okay, so this man, who is not officially ordained by the authorities, by the secular authorities of that time as a high priest, nevertheless functioned as a high priest. Is being dressed in linen, is sort of also indicative that this is a Yom Kippur Avodah. If we read in Vayikra, Leviticus, Sefer Leviim, chapter 16, we see that the Kohen Hagadol is entered the Kodesh Kodeshim on Yom Kippur wearing a linen tunic. Okay, so in the late Second Temple period, and we have to go over this in order to understand why was there an opposition high priest. Under the Herodian rule, the ordinary people of Israel detested and distrusted the establishment high priests, in particular Beit Hanan, the official mafia-style pro-Roman, pro-Herodian establishment Boethusian high priests. The hatred of a majority of Israelites towards the Herodian-appointed high priestly dynasties, which began to rule when Herod the Terrible imported Boethus as high priest from Egypt and then married his daughter Mariamne. This is seen in the words of Abba Shaul ben Batnid, who lived in Jerusalem around the year 40. The house of Boethus heads the list of the wicked priestly families that are mentioned by Abba Shaul. Tractate Pesachim 57a of the Gemara and the Talmud Bavli quotes a poem of woes composed by Abba Shaul, which criticizes Boethusian high priests who were put in charge of the Beit HaMikdash in Jerusalem by the Romans through their Herodian puppet rulers. Woe to me because of the house of Boethus, woe to me because of their battens, woe to me because of the house of Hanan, woe to me because of their whisperings, woe to me because of the house of Katros, woe to me because of their pens, woe is me because of the house of Ishmael ben Fabi, woe to me because of their fists, for they are the high priests, and their sons are the temple treasurers, and their sons-in-law are the temple trustees, and their hired servants, acting as private gangster militia bully boys, beat the people with batons. One can infer that many, if not most, of the Israelites viewed Yaakov Tzaddik as the real morally superior opposition high priest of Israel, and only trusted the efficacy of a kaporah, the atonement made by this person, and not that of an official high priest, which was seen as hopelessly compromised and impure. Yaakov's abstaining from wine and not shaving his head indicates that he was following the Nazirite rules laid out in Numbers 6, Sefer Habakkuk, the book of Numbers, chapter 6, where part of the Nazirite vow is not to drink any wine, and also that no razor shall come upon the head of a Nazir. Okay, John Painter states that Yaakov's abstention from anointing himself with oil and not taking public baths indicate a complete rejection of Greco-Roman Gentile ways, where there public baths and perfumed oils and so forth. The Midbar tradition, the wilderness tradition, the Rechabai tradition, the Bedouin-like tradition of these people were exceedingly skeptical about all such pampered ways and self-indulgence. What the old Marxists would have called petit bourgeois self-indulgence. Okay, let me just take a sip of coffee here. Jerome, the patristic writer, so-called church father, basing his account on that of Hegesippus, Clement of Alexandria, as well as Josephus, also knows this when he says in the Lives of Illustrious Men, chapter 2, that Yaakov HaTzadik alone enjoyed the privilege of entering the Holy of Holies in the Temple of Jerusalem. Indeed, he did not wear woolen, but only white linen clothes, and went into the temple alone, and prayed on behalf of a people, so that his knees were reputed to have acquired the callousness of a camel's knees. Epiphanius, whom Jerome sometimes called a foolish old man, but some of his quotations are very, very, very useful. Also quoted these works as follows in Panarion chapter 30. Now, all of us have got in our houses maybe a box in which we keep like medication and stuff like this. The term Panarion means medicine chest. It's a sort of a box with household medicines. So in their writings against heresies, the patristic writers would use the term Panarion to refer to their own writings. So they said that their own writings are like a medicine cabinet containing potions and plasters against all these sort of like heretical upstream currents. So Epiphanius says as follows: to Yaakov alone it was allowed to enter once a year into the Kodesh Kodeshim, the Holy of Holies, of the Beit HaMikdash, because he was a Nazarite and connected to the priesthood. James was a distinguished member of a Kohanim, the priesthood, because the two tribes, the priestly tribe Lewi and the royal tribe Yehuda, were linked to one another. The royal tribe to the priestly tribe. Okay, just a note about Hebrew pronunciation. This tribe is usually called the tribe of Levi, but a more accurate pronunciation is most probably Lewi. The waw, the vav, is more a W, a w sound, and not a v sound. And it's a tzere under the E, or the E sound, the E vowel is a tzere, it's not a shava. So better transliteration and pronunciation is Lewi, Shevet Lewi, the tribe of Levi, Shevet Lewi. Okay, so we see Yaakov as a zealous and a devout adherent to the Torah of Moshe, who intercedes in extended, intense prayer inside the Kodesh Kodeshim of the Beit HaMikdash for the forgiveness of the sins of the people. A high priest could only enter the Kodesh Kodeshim once a year, on Yom Kippurim. The extant traditions depict Yaakov HaTzadik acting as opposition high priest of Israel in a Yom Kippur prayer service inside the Holy of Holies of the Heichal. The Heichal is the central building of the temple of the Beit HaMikdash. By acting as a popular opposition high priest, Yaakov HaTzadik must have incurred the intense hatred of Beit Hanan, of the house of Anas, the official Herodian appointed lineage of high priests. The message to the house of Hanan was, by virtue of what Yaakov HaTzadik did, you, the officially appointed rich high priests, are hopelessly corrupt and unrighteous, and your temple service is therefore incapable of atoning for the nation. An opposition high priest of sufficient kedusha, purity, tahara, and righteousness, therefore, has to perform the national avodah, the service for atonement on Yom HaKippurim. Okay, so the next point that we're going to look at is Yaakov HaTzadik as the appointed successor of Jesus. Eusebius wrote as follows about Yaakov HaTzadik and his history of the church. Then there was Yaakov, who was called the master's brother, for he too was named Joseph's son. This Yaakov, whom the people of old called Hatzadik because of his outstanding tzedakah, was the first, as the records tell us, to be elected to the throne of overseer of Pakit of the Jerusalem Kahal Ecclesia of the Evionim. Okay, this group is interchangeably called in their writings the Evionim, the Netzarim, the Osei HaTorah, as well as the Kanaim. Kanaim are people who have got what is called Kinat HaTorah in their hearts. They are passionate and zealous for the Torah. This group is also called the Osei HaTorah, the workers or the doers of the Torah. In the book of Yeshayahu, Perek 11, chapter 11, it's seen as a prophecy of a future Messiah. The term Messiah just simply means a decent, good, high-quality ruler. The messianic ideal is that Israel is going to have a excellent ruler at some stage. Greater David, that is sort of the start as well as the finish of a messianic concept. It's an excellent, it's a leadership quality concept. The Evionim, this group also refer to themselves as the Evionim. The Evionim are the poor ones, people who are expressly avoiding the trappings of riches. And as I've said, the term Netzarim comes from Sefer Yeshayahu, the book of Isaiah, chapter 11. It starts off with a Netzer and a Choter will come forth from a stump of Yeshai. In other words, the Davidic dynasty is seen as a cut-off tree, and this tree stump seems to be dead. But just when you think that this is over, there's never going to be a ruler of a quality of King David on the throne of Israel, from the soil next to this tree stump comes a shoot, and this shoot is termed a choter and a netzer. It's a shoot. It's another term for a phenomenon of this nature is a tzemach. It's a shoot. It's like an unexpected side branch, but coming from the soil or from this seemingly dead tree stump. Okay, Eusebius also wrote as follows: there were men having the same name, James, Yaakov, but this one, the master's brother, was kadosh from his birth. He was set apart. He was, as you say in German and Afrikaans and some couple of languages, he was ganz anders. There was an author from the new Marxist Frankfurter Schule, Max Horkheimer, and he wrote a book, Het Sehnsucht nach dem ganz andere. It was translated with a horrible English translation, The Quest for the Holy. But the German is The Sehnsucht nach dem ganz andere. It's thousands of times more potent and stronger than the English. The English just doesn't work. So once again, the traditional word for translating or rendering the term holiness, or the term Kedusha in Hebrew is the English holiness, but it doesn't really give a picture. The connotation for those who knows German is dem ganz andere, die ganz andere, something that is like radically discontinuous from what is ordinary. Okay, so everyone from the master's time until our own has called this Yaakov Hatzadik, the righteous, because of his unsurpassable tzedakah righteousness. He was called righteous and Obleas. Obleas has got a meaning more or less bulwark of a people, righteousness, pillar, and for Epiphanius this means wall, for Eusebius this means the protection of a people. Okay, the 2nd century Syriac Apostolic Constitution states that Jesus personally appointed his brother Yaakov as his successor. Yaakov was the brother of Jesus and the one appointed overseer of a kahal of an assembly in Jerusalem by the master himself. In his History of the Church, Eusebius writes as follows about the election or appointment of Yaakov Hatzadik as the leader. Yaakov was the first, as the records tell us, to be elected to the throne of overseer of the Jerusalem assembly. According to the Gospel of Thomas, one of the Nag Hammadi documents, knowing that Jesus would soon depart from them, his Talmudim asked him who would lead them after his departure, and his reply was as follows. Logion, word number 12, Gospel of Thomas. And Jesus said to all his disciples, "In the place you are to go to Yaakov Hatzadik, James the righteous, James the just, for whose sake heaven and earth were created." The Palestinian Epiphanes, Bishop of Salamis, had access to works he referred to as Anabatmoi, Jacobo, Ma'olot Yaakov, the Ascents of James, as well as the Gospel of the Hebrews, used by the ancient Ebionites, or the poor ones. The Gospel of the Hebrews was also known to Jerome and to others. Both of these Ebionite manuscripts are now lost, but we do have fragments of them extant in quotations by other authors. Bishop Epiphanius states that the Ascents of James dealt with the discourses that James gave from the steps of the temple to the people of Jerusalem, and says that James was the first to whom the Master, in other words Jesus, entrusted his throne on earth. Hieronymus Jerome also states that after Jesus died, James was immediately appointed overseer of the assembly in Jerusalem by the apostles. Jerome also mentioned that Yaakov ruled the assembly in Jerusalem for 30 years, until the 7th year of Caesar Nero, thereby dating Yaakov's rule from the early 930s, reaffirming indirectly that Yaakov's succession of Jesus was by immediate and direct appointment, as well as election. In the recognitions of Clement, we read that Yaakov Hatzadik was an esteemed and capable leader. The assembly which was constituted in Jerusalem was most plentifully multiplied and grew, being governed with the most righteous ordinances by Yaakov Hatzadik, James the Just. Okay, now we look at the judicial murder of James the Just by the high priest Hanan bar Hanan. According to Josephus, Antiquities of the Jews, when the Roman governor died in 62 CE, and a new one was still on the way to Israel from Rome, the establishment high priest Hanan bar Hanan used the power vacuum to execute Jesus' brother James. This was done because of Yaakov's role as a supreme leader of a Kinat HaTorah, a certain group within the Zealot opposition group in Israel, as well as by implication of his role as the opposition high priest, which must have irritated the establishment high priests greatly. Ananus bar Hananus assembled the Sanhedrin of judges and brought before them the brother of Jesus, whose name was James, Yaakov, and some of his companions. And when he had formulated an accusation against them as breakers of the Torah, he delivered them to be stoned. Those citizens of Jerusalem who were deeply concerned about justice disliked what was done, being very upset at Ananus' breach of the laws. They therefore sent a delegation to King Agrippa II, imploring him to instruct Ananus the high priest that he should refrain from such rash action, and that his trial and execution of James was a cruel travesty of justice. Okay, so we see that Yaakov was stoned, and he was stoned as a breaker of the Torah. Now, the thing that we must understand is that during the Yom Kippur Avodah, the name of Hashem, the ineffable name of the Almighty, is pronounced. Only during the Yom Kippur prayer service, it could only be done by the high priest 1 day per year. So what we see is that Yaakov Tzaddik specifically was stoned, and stoning is a penalty for so-called blasphemy, and it was construed by Ananus. We can infer that Yaakov Tzaddik was an unauthorized high priest, and that Yaakov, therefore, pronouncing the name of the Almighty during the Yom Kippur Avodah was an act of blasphemy, and that was then the basis of the accusation against him, which was specifically by stoning. Okay, Eusebius, the author of Ecclesiastical History, dedicates a whole chapter to the death of James and his martyrdom. He states that his account of the murder of Yaakov Tzaddik is based on what has been passed down from Hegesippus. He also quotes Josephus' account, as well as other lost passages from Clement of Alexandria. The executioners said to one another, "Let us stone Yaakov Tzaddik." And they began to stone him. But Yaakov turned and knelt down and said, "I entreat you, Hashem, Eloheinu, and our Father, Avotenu, forgive them, for they know not what they do." And while they were stoning him, one of the Kohanim, one of the sons of Rechab, one of the Rechabites, the descendant of Rechavim, who are mentioned by Yirmiyahu the prophet in chapter 35, cried out, saying, "Stop! What are you doing? Listen, the tzaddik is praying a marvelous prayer on your behalf." Another one, who was a fuller, a laundryman, took the club with which he beat out clothing and struck the tzaddik on the head, and thus the tzaddik suffered martyrdom. Okay, the above account needs some background. Death by stoning was a penalty for blasphemy. In other words, specifically for the pronunciation of the name Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. In late Second Temple period Judaism, only the Kohen Hagadol, the high priest, was allowed to pronounce the name Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, and that only on one specific day of the year, Yom HaKippurim, Yom Kippur, which falls on Tishrei 10. What we have before us is a power struggle, because between, on the one hand, the profane and wicked, rich and powerful, Herodian appointed establishment Sadducean high priest Ananus, and on the other side, the devout, popular opposition high priest Yaakov Tzaddik. It has been passed down that the descendants of Jehonadav ben Rechav, in other words, the Rechabites, the Rechavim, married into the priestly families, and that many of the poorer, devout priests were Rechavite priests. The Rechavim were Bedouin-like dwellers in tents and other simple dwellings, and who consciously avoided the trappings of riches. The Rechavim were also known for not drinking any wine, see Yirmiyahu 35. Reading the account of the life and execution of James, it is evident that Yaakov Tzaddik was in agony that the official high priesthood had fallen into spiritual corruption, and therefore stepped in to perform the Yom Kippur prayer service in the Holy of Holies, even though Hanan bar Hanan was technically the officially appointed high priest. Ananus was enraged by this challenge to his prestige and authority, and decided to rid himself of the opposition high priest, Yaakov Tzaddik. The charge against the tzaddik was blasphemy, because he dared to act as high priest without any official secular appointment, and then pronounced the ineffable name Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh during his purportedly authorized Yom Kippur prayer service in the Kodesh Kodeshim, Holy of Holies of the Beit HaMikdash. The Talmud recounts that if a priest was found to have served in the temple in a state of impurity, his fellow priests had to lead him outside the temple compound and there beat and crush his skull with a club. In the execution of a tzaddik, we see that this method of execution was employed. Okay, so the accusation against Yaakov Tzaddik must have been illegally entering the Holy of Holies, acting as illegal high priest, and then illegally pronouncing the name Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. Okay, so the term stoning refers to death by blunt force impact and includes throwing a person off a height and then casting boulders on his chest and head. Beating the skull of a person with a club was very often the final and merciful act in an execution by stoning, blunt force trauma, blunt force impact, to make certain that the condemned person was dead and not suffering. Epiphanius in Heresies states that the Rechavite priest mentioned by Hegesippus was Simeon, the brother of James. Targum Jonathan on Jeremiah 35:19 indicates the Rechabites were still active and a well-known group at the end of the Second Temple period, existing as a recognized group up to the destruction of Jerusalem by Titus, partaking in the temple service. They were descended from the old Bnei Yehonadav, sons of Yehonadav party, and included devout Hasidim such as James and Simeon, who lived the consecrated, simple life of Rechavim. The form of austere Kedusha presented in accounts of the life of Yehonadav ben Rechav is therefore also observed in extant accounts about Jesus' brothers Yaakov and Simeon. Okay, let's look now at the destruction of Jerusalem in the year 70, popularly attributed to the murder of Yaakov HaTzadik. Yaakov HaTzadik was called Oblias, which means bulwark of a people, and righteousness. For Epiphanius, this means wall. For Eusebius, protection of a people. All of these are expressions of a tzaddik as protector of a people. The presence of living tzaddikim in a community guards them against error, severe judgment, and calamities. When Abraham, for example, interceded for the two evil cities of Sodom and Gomorrah in the Jordan Valley, the understanding is clear that the presence of a minyan, a quorum of tzaddikim in a community, can protect it against a has gezerah, a heavenly decree or an edict. When a community persecutes and annihilates its tzaddikim, it opens the door to severe judgment. Their protective shield has departed when the tzaddik is killed. Josephus insists that in his lifetime, many people believed that the unrighteous execution of Yaakov HaTzadik by the high priest Hanan bar Hanan in 62 CE was the underlying reason for the destruction of Jerusalem and its temple by the Romans in 70 CE. These things, the 66 to 73 CE uprising, and the consequent destruction of Jerusalem and the Holy Temple by the Romans in 70 CE, happened to the Sadducean temple-controlling establishment Judeans in retribution for the unrighteous execution of Yaakov HaTzadik, who was a brother of Jesus. For though James was the most righteous of men, the rich, powerful, corrupt establishment Sadducees, temple-controlling Judeans, put him to death. This passage from Josephus, remarked on also by Origen and Jerome, still exists in Eusebius' ecclesiastical history, in Jerome's commentary on Galatians, and in Origen's letter Contra Celsus. Commenting on the account by Josephus, as quoted by Origen and Jerome, Eusebius says as follows in History of the Church: So remarkable a person must James have been, so universally esteemed for tzedakah, for righteousness. But even the most intelligent of the Yehudim felt this was why his martyrdom was immediately followed, within a couple of years, by the siege and destruction of Jerusalem by the Romans. Eusebius quotes Origen's commentary on Matthew and writes that Josephus gave testimony that the righteousness of James was so great that the people thought they had suffered these things, in other words, the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple, in the year 70 on account of the martyrdom, the judicial murder of Yaakov HaTzadik. For his part, Jerome in Lives of Illustrious Men writes, the same Josephus records the tradition that this James was of so great kedusha, holiness, and reputation among the people, that the destruction of Jerusalem was believed to have occurred on account of his death. Okay, so let's have a look at Yaakov the Just as a prayer for rain in the tradition of Choni HaMagil, Choni the circle drawer. In Anabat Moy Jacobo, the sense of James, it was recounted that once, during a severe drought, Yaakov Tzaddik lifted his hands to heaven and prayed, and at once heaven sent rain. Yaakov Tzaddik is here pictured as a prayer for rain in the tradition of Israel's famous prayers for rain, namely Eliyahu Hanavi, the prophet Eliyahu, Honi Hamagil, Honi the circle drawer, also known as Honi HaTzadik, and Hanan HaTzadik, and also Hanan the hidden, as well as James's contemporary Nakdimon ben Gurion, rendered as Nicodemus. Okay, let's have a look at the following extant tradition about Yaakov Tzaddik, touching the zitzit of the garments worn by Yaakov Tzaddik. In his commentary on Galatians, Jerome writes, "So holy, set apart, kadosh, was Yaakov Tzaddik that the people zealously tried to touch the tzitzit of his garment. These are the tzitzit commanded to be worn by Israelites as instructed in Sefer HaPekudim, Numbers, chapter 15, so that when you see the tzitzit, you will remember all the mitzvot, all the commandments of Hashem, and do them." Okay, so in summary, Yaakov Tzaddik, James the righteous, Jacobus die rechtvaardige in some of the Western European languages. Okay, all the above sources are unanimous in their depiction of Yaakov Tzaddik as the undisputed head of a Kenat HaTorah, a certain grouping within the Torah, the Zealot movement, in Israel in the years 30 CE to 62 CE, but also as one of the most highly regarded leaders of his generation, one of the Gedolei Hador, great ones of a generation, a tzaddik par excellence, whose judicial murder in 62 CE at the hands of a rich, powerful and corrupt Sadducean temple establishment under the wicked high priest Ananus bar Hananas was believed to have brought the divine judgment of the downfall of Jerusalem and the destruction of a second temple in 70 CE. This is in keeping with a notion of Proverbs 10 and the Zohar, that the tzaddik is the foundation and the pillar that upholds the olam, that upholds the world. Paul understands that Yaakov was considered a pillar, which is a synonymous term for the term oblias, when he speaks in Galatians 2 verse 9 of going up to Jerusalem and meeting Yaakov, Kepha and Johanan, those reputed to be pillars. And of course Paul's sentence then adds, "But what they are means nothing to me." It's to him of no purport. Paul's attitude of persistent and bitter insubordination towards these respected leaders, particularly Yaakov Tzaddik, is a key to determining the identity of a character in the Dead Sea Scrolls known as Ha-Letzan, the windbag, the clown, the man of scoffing, the Matif Kazav and the Hatif Kazav, the pourer out of lying, the fountains of lies, and the Ish Kazav, the man of lying. This is quoted, part of this sentence is quoted from Professor Eisenman's book, James, the Brother of Jesus, the 2001 edition. Okay, Josephus, Hegesippus, Clement of Alexandria, Hippolytus, Origen, Eusebius, Epiphanius, Jerome, as well as the Gospel of Thomas found at Nag Hammadi in Egypt, know of Yaakov's towering reputation for tzedakah, righteousness, his judicial murder by the Herodian appointed Sadducees, and the link between his execution and the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple. However, the book of Acts ignores James' appointment or election as the successor of Jesus, ignores much of James's high reputation, and pretends to know nothing about his clashes with Paul and James's judicial murder at the hand of Ananus bar Ananus. The book of Acts is extremely tendentious, and it completely misrepresents the early history of this movement. It actually Paulinizes it. the book of Acts was written about 140, 145, 150, and the book of Acts is imposing a Pauline style theology to some extent on the older generation of leaders of this movement, something which is completely non-historical. Okay, so now we come to Pesher Habakkuk. What I've got in this write-up is first of all just Pesher Habakkuk as it is. We're not going to go through this. We are going to go through the next part. The next part is where I've also written a commentary on Pesher Habakkuk. So this is an opportune time to take a break, have a bit of coffee, and stop the recording. And we will go on with the Pesher Habakkuk plus the expository commentary in a couple of minutes. Thank you very much. Thank you.